Hello, everyone, and welcome to our University Business Web Seminar here today, which is entitled Going into the Cloud, Functionalities Campuses Should Look For When Making Transactions Cloud-Based. And all of this is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor here today, Transact Campus. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items and we'll get right to the presentation. If at any time you need any technical support, please just use the chat panel, which you can find is on the bottom right-hand side of your screen there. Then just select on my name, Stephen Blackburn or host, and then just type in your message and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. I'm also about to submit a phone number and access code in the chat that you can use to dial in if you want to listen in privately or if you don't have any speakers. So look out for that in the next few minutes or so. We will also be welcoming any questions that you have here today with a Q&A session, and that will be happening at the end of the presentation. You can submit a question at any point from now until the end by using the Q&A panel and like the chat panel that is in the bottom right-hand side of your screen there. Then just send in your questions to all panelists, and they will be answered during that Q&A portion that I just mentioned. Also, the last point I'd like to make, and then we'll get started, is that if you would like to access this webinar at a later time, you'll be pleased to know that all of you who are here and everyone who registered, all of you will receive an email from us from UB with a link to the slides as well as an archive recording. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker that we have with us today. Please welcome Scott Dennison, who is the Senior Director of Product Management over at Transact Campus. Welcome, Scott. Great to have you with us here today.
Nice to be here, Stephen. Thank you.
All right, you may now begin and you should have access to the slides.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Just a moment here, and I will move this forward just a little bit. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for your time and attendance. I'd like to spend a little bit of time and share with you some of the things we've learned on the functionalities that we think are important for you to look at as you move your transaction systems to a cloud-based system. We've already seen this. Let me start out with a little bit of background about Transact Campus so you understand where some of this information is coming from. Transact Campus has been in business for about 38 years, providing a lot of software and hardware services to educational institutions, primarily higher education. We currently have about 1,750 clients, primarily in higher education in North America, that buy at least one, if not multiple, of our products. And with those products, we're able to serve about 12 million students in a typical year. I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about our three product areas, just so you're familiar. But accomplishing that does require a huge suite of partners that we are integrated with or partners with. And the net result of that is our products do process about $46 billion a year in payments for higher education. And we do also issue at least 2.5 million credentials a year as well. That's kind of a high-level overview of Transact Campus. Our products fall into three areas. The first one will be the main topic of conversation for today, which is the Campus ID. So when you issue an ID to your student, physical card or increasingly a mobile credential, you and your students probably want it to work everywhere across campus where those students need a credential. So door access, for example, is one area that has a very high number of transactions. And also for the stored value and meal plans in your dining, of course, print copy, vending, laundry, and even more. So that's one area of our business where we sell a suite of products to allow you to issue and to utilize that Campus ID. We do also have other groups of products for integrated payments where we facilitate or process payments for a number of schools. This is often tuition, room and board, but it can also be payments at a point of sale terminal, stored value or meal plan purchases made in other software. And then we handle a lot of the back end work that's really the complicated part, with the T98 or the 1098 bills, international payments, the gateways and so forth, a lot of things that are actually pretty hard to do, but are really valuable. And then lastly, we have campus commerce, which you could certainly includes point of sale that you might use at a physical terminal, but also includes other products increasingly for mobile ordering as well. And so those three together are our three primary product areas. And then we're tying it together with a data analytics platform, which gives you more than just the usual tabular report with columns and rows of numbers, but also analytics so you can analyze the trends at your campus in real time and over time. And then lastly, we'll talk about a little bit in a minute, is putting all this on the Transact One platform. So instead of having a group of disparate products, you have more of a cohesive solution. I mentioned earlier that we don't do this without help from a lot of partners. So here you see just a brief overview of some of the better known partners that we have that are integration or retail partners. And this helps make that campus ID work everywhere on your campus, not just in a few places on your campus. So obviously, as you're looking to move a transaction system to the cloud, that compatibility is going to be something very important that we recommend that you look for. All right, so some of you might be familiar with our two existing transaction systems, the Transact SaaS and our TSC, or Transaction System Enterprise. We've recently launched Transact IDX, which is our newest SaaS-based product. And rather than making this just a product promotion, what I wanted to do was talk about some of the things we learned while doing that research from talking to numerous clients and looking at market trends. What we've heard is there's four main challenges that many of you face. So I think in the middle of the screen, this list you see probably won't be any real surprise to many of you. Imagine that many of you are experiencing some, if not all of these. So one of the first pain points we've heard is, as we all understand, there's kind of a declining nationwide enrollment right now, and that makes it harder to compete for students. Both to recruit them and to retain them as well. That makes it even more valuable to the university business. So one thing we've seen that's important there is being able to provide your students with a very modern experience that they expect. In our Voice of Student exercises, we've heard repetitively from students that they don't want a bunch of clunky, outdated apps. They don't, and websites, they don't want app proliferation where there's a million apps they have to learn to navigate their campus experience. And if at all possible, just make it work in the phone wallet. So those are some of the things we've heard that 18-year-olds really look for and can help you differentiate yourself in this really trying time for enrollment. Second thing is in the current inflationary environment, it's harder to recruit people. It's harder to keep the staff you need to do your job. It makes it hard, and a lot of that is financially driven, as well as all of the low unemployment numbers we're hearing now. That's great news for a lot of people. We're super happy about it, but it also makes recruitment harder. So one of the things that's, it's almost kind of annoying, I think, for a lot of us to be told to work smarter, not harder. I think we've all been told that at various points in our career. But one really important thing to look for in your transaction system is, does it actually help me get rid of some of the busy work and help me be a little more efficient so it actually contributes a bit towards that endeavor. Part of that is also simplifying the daily operations that you go through. Right now, I imagine a lot of you probably have some very manual processes and tools. Some of them may not even be ones you really think about because it's been something that's been done for so long, it just feels natural. But if you step back and look at it, they might be things that are a lot more manual than really should be the case in 2022 or almost 23. And then those are areas where cloud-based transaction system done right can help save you some time and some frustration on your limited staff. And then lastly, I think we've all heard about the numerous ransomware and cybersecurity incidents that go on a daily basis. So now it's even more important to keep all that data secure, keep it private, because the last thing you want is for your school to be in the news because there was a data breach. One thing that I say often is that cybersecurity it's not just a technology, it's not just a process, it's not just people, but it's all of that in a company culture. It's something you have to value. It's something that has to be constantly invested in terms of technology, people, processes, and even organizational value. So that's a really important thing to look for. Many companies can generate a SOC Type 2 report. It's another thing to live it day in and day out and live it over the years to help keep everyone safe and keep their data safe. All right, so with that in mind, we are going to go to first poll question that Stephen's just put over in the polling that you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. So if everyone would, you've got about 45 seconds. Look over this question and could you please answer, what do you think is the biggest problem that you wish your transaction system could solve for you? So everyone go ahead and take a few seconds, look over the answers, and go ahead and pick them in the polling on the right-hand side of your screen. All right, so I believe we're done here.
Yep, I'm posting them right now.
Okay. All right, so it looks like our top answer is being able to meet the campus ID integration needs of other departments. All right, good news. Okay, so in order to kind of facilitate this, what you should look for conversation, I'm going to use our product transact IDX as kind of the basis of conversation. But again, that's because we have so recently spent so much energy understanding what your school's current and future needs are. So I'll kind of talk to the needs and the things you could look for in any transaction system, but just kind of use IDX as the point of discussion. So the first thing is when we talk about a transaction system, it's really important to look holistically. Does this make it easy for you to provide your students with the modern ID experience they expect? You know, when we see teenagers coming to college and you know they've used the phone for basically their whole life, you know, sometimes handing them an outdated piece of technology, it's kind of almost to them, it's almost like an out of body experience, even though to us it's very natural. So I would look for, you know, does that system support all the different credentials you're using on campus? And is it ready to support mobile credentials? While we realize that not all campuses have adopted mobile credential yet, we're seeing a very steep trend line in adoption. So even if it doesn't today, do you have a pathway to get there? Obviously, I think some of the basics we would all recognize. Does it support stored value? And we'll talk a little bit later about all the places that stored value can work. Does it support the meal plans and all of your meal plan complexities and needs? Sometimes those can get a little time consuming to set up. Door access. Does it integrate to your door access system or systems? Because often that door access is the most common transaction that's used by your campus ID. Events. Can you track who attended an event and can you report on it? It might be partially to control admission, but a lot of times we've heard very commonly is, can I monitor the attendance at an event? Because that gives you data you can drill into to see what could I do to make that event more successful in the future, or maybe it was already wildly successful and I just want our administrators to know that it was. So it's very important to be able to use that same credential to track the events. And then there's kind of this broad category of and more. So we really recommend that you look at all the places on campus where your credential is used. Some of them might be obvious because it's already integrated to your current system. Others might be a little less obvious. You know, maybe if you're using an old MagSwipe or something, there might be a department that went and bought a MagStripe reader off the internet and somehow was able to back into data they got from student information. So you may not even know they're actually using your credential in some locations on campus. So it's important to really understand that. And then also another question to ask is of all the places where maybe they just ask for a visual confirmation of an ID, is there a way that you can be a good partner on campus and help automate that by integrating that to the software that that particular department is using? Another great thing to look at is, are you buying a group of disparate products? Are you buying some tightly interconnected products that are part of a platform? So at Transact, one thing we've been working on is a Transact One platform that stitches all of our products together into really a cohesive solution. So a couple things to look for there. On the first line, I threw in SaaS, and we've all heard SaaS and cloud for many years now. A couple things to look at is it hosted or is it multi-tenant? Hosted in many cases means taking the software that you might run on premise and putting it in a server on the cloud. There's benefits there because your service provider is responsible for maintaining it and keeping it updated. So there are benefits, but there's also limitations because in that instance, just as your computer on campus might get overloaded and run slow at peak times, so can that hosted. So what multi-tenant means is that software has been written to in such a way that it can securely serve the needs of many schools at the same time. That gives you a great load balancing opportunity because that moment when you're busy might be when another school is not. And so you have many resources available to say import many student records in a short period of time. That also gives you scalability. As we all know, most on-premise computers, most of the time, are just sitting there idle, not doing much. But when you need the power like at the beginning of a semester or maybe the end when you're trying to clear it out. So that's another real advantage. The high reliability is another advantage. If you've got one computer on campus that's running your transaction system, in a cloud environment where maybe you're sharing the resources of 20 computers, it gives you much better reliability. And a good SaaS system, you'll even find, will have multiple data centers. So even if there was a problem in the eastern part of the US, the western part still works. And a lot of those, depending on how you design it, there could be downtime in the middle, or if it's designed correctly, you'll never know the difference. So when you log in the next time, it'll simply shift you over to the West servers and you'll never know the difference. It just keeps working. And that's how you get high reliability. And lastly, that's how you get the always up-to-date software without downtime. Because if there's 20 computers all running there and it's designed right, we can redirect the traffic over from one computer to another, update that software, turn it back on, and the great part is you as a school will never know the difference. When you log in the next time, you'll just get new features with no downtime. So that takes a lot of pressure off your plate for that planning for the 4 or 8 or 24-hour downtime of trying to update software. Another important one that we've seen a really huge increase in usage of is single sign-on. It's a great convenience for you as administrators and for your students because you can use the same username and password and even MFA that you've used everywhere else on campus. It gives you a lot greater security because your IT department can put in all kinds of specific security rules to help ensure the person logging in is really one of your students and not a hacker from somewhere else. It's also great for being able to onboard and offboard both students and employees because when they're added to your campus identity system, they can now be given access to the transaction system. And when they leave or they graduate, same thing, they can be taken out. So that helps avoid security issues where former employees or students can still log into things that they shouldn't be anymore. Look for the web design is what we call a responsive web design. That means that the same screen will nicely rescale itself in a very functional way for the big, your big PC screen, your laptop, your tablet, and even your phone. That makes it work anywhere. Look for, is this software the complete solution, or is it just a little bits in the cloud and you still need software on premise? In this case with Transact IDX, it does everything cloud-based. So if you're using one of our existing solutions, you no longer need that. So it kind of gives you that full SaaS-based solution. And then last thing is look for, are you getting a platform integration or are you still getting a lot of disparate integration of all the little different pieces, parts that comprise your ecosystem? Because for your increasingly thinly staffed IT department, it's a lot easier to maintain one good integration than 20. So with that in mind, we now have our second poll question for you. So same thing, if you would, on the right, go ahead and fill that in. What's your biggest problem integrating your transaction and your student information systems? All right, so we've got that poll closed and we'll find some answers here in just a moment. So it looks like the overwhelming answer was that it's inflexible to reconfigure for new needs. So that's another great one to look at is your transaction system, is it kind of hard coded that you must put in data just one way and it cannot be changed? Or does it have some flexibility to consume new data in new and different ways? And especially look for, can you reconfigure it yourself? And is the work reasonable to do, or is it overly complicated? Next thing, I think it's very important to look for a very intuitive interface, not just the UI you see, but the whole user experience. Many times you might have turnover of staff, student workers, people that you need to do a couple basic things, and you probably don't have a lot of time to train them or send them to a whole class. So I really encourage you to look, is this transaction system, is the interface very intuitive? For example, here you see a screen of IDX. This one just shows some of the functionality. But this is a way that, for example, if you had a student worker who had to go chase down problems in a transaction, they could do this very quickly and easily. Honestly, a lot of 19 and 20-year-olds might even just figure it out on their own by logging in, or in other cases, maybe you need a minimal amount of training. So that's the thing, that kind of thing that can save you a lot of time and frustration. And when you go out on vacation, you really want to be on vacation. You don't want to be that one expert that's the only person in the school that knows how to run the software, and then they always call you then. Next thing, look for the integrated reporting. Can you get to your data very easily? So what you see here on screen is just a couple examples of reporting. We've all seen this for decades. It's rows and columns of text and data, and that's useful. Certainly you need to be able to export it out. One thing I don't have a screenshot for you today, but look at analytics. Is there a system where you can log in and see a dashboard and see the trending of this over time? Is your meal plan utilization varying by day, week, month? How'd the utilization go today at lunch? How's that compare to what I saw 2 months ago or last year? This semester, am I seeing a shift in student behaviors where maybe they move from one dining location to another? Have I suddenly not gotten any transactions from a vending machine that might be offline? Those are the kind of things where, in addition to reporting, I really recommend that you look for, does it have an embedded analytics? Some schools use analytic platforms like a Tableau, for example, to ingest data from multiple sources and aggregate it together. That's very useful as well. If you're one of those institutions, look, does your transaction system have a data streaming? Many of them can export out data once a day in batch, and that's certainly reasonably useful. Even better, can it stream the data real time so you can see that dashboard of what happened today instead of only having visibility to yesterday or before. Also, student interface. Look at the student interface, and is this something that presents a good image for my school? You should expect that to be branded by your school colors, your school logos, maybe even your school URL, so it looks like a total school experience. Making it quick and easy and modern. For a lot of students, they'll just look at it and get it. Again, this is a responsive design, so no matter what device they're watching on, they can see it and it looks reasonably usable. Is it being hosted by the transaction system, or is this a bunch of work you're going to have to convince IT to do, not just to build it, but to maintain it? In the case of IDX, the way that we've built it is it's a total transact hosted solution with school branding, naming, colors, URL, everything. And it's simply something that you configure. So this is something that even in a card office, you could set this up in a few minutes pretty easily with just a little bit of one-time IT support. Also, in that system, when they drill down, can students automate and do some of the common things that you would want them to do themselves? Certainly seeing balances is great. Adding money is great, but also other things like if they lost their credential, can they log into a website and report it as lost? And if it fits with your policy, can they later report it as found? That improves the security because if the card is lost at 2 in the morning on Friday night and there's no one there to turn it off, you can disable that card right away. Similarly, it saves a lot of phone calls, trips across campus, and just automates what's really busy work that many students could do themselves. I mentioned earlier the mobile credential. And on the left side of the screen, you see some basic statistics for Transact's mobile credential. But in the three boxes there, I recommend that you look for three really important attributes of your mobile credential. The first thing is does it work on all of your students' devices? iPhones, Apple Watches, and Android. There's many mobile credentials out there that will work on some, but maybe not all. Now, the one asterisk I will put beside that is that because of the wide breadth of different Android phones, there are some very old devices that may not have the right hardware or be capable of supporting mobile credentials, but those are usually a very small and shrinking percentage on virtually any campus. Secondly, there's an important technical differentiator that drives the performance in the user experience. There's many mobile credentials that use Bluetooth, and there's an increasing number that use NFC or near field communication. And I strongly advocate that you look for and insist on one using NFC because of the user experience it will give you and your students. If you've ever been to a hotel with a mobile key, you've probably been through that experience where you get off of the elevator, you pull out your phone, you open it up, you unlock it, you find the app, you open the app, you wait for the app, and then you press the button and you hope you timed it just right so when you walk up to the room, the door will unlock. That's Bluetooth. NFC, if you've ever used Apple Pay or Google Pay, can be just like that depending on how someone has implemented it. For example, with our mobile credential on Apple phones, we have what's called express mode. That means that you don't have to unlock the phone, open up any app, or do anything. You can literally walk up and tap your phone to the reader, and in about a 1 second experience, unlock the door, pay for a meal, complete your transaction. So it has really the same user experience as a plastic card where there's no extra steps. You just hold it to the device, hopefully get your green light and complete your transaction. So near field technology enables that, but additionally, depending on which vendor you pick, it's very important that they have that functionality really running smoothly for you. But that I think should be the expectation, is that express mode where you just hold your phone to the reader, 1 second, you're in. Another thing to look for is of the mobile credentials out there, many of them come from the physical access space, and they're great at getting you in a door. And that's important because doors are probably one of the most common transactions on your campus. But for a decent student experience, it really needs to work everywhere the ID works. So look for a mobile credential that is not just for door access, but also will complete stored value, meal plan transactions, and even identity or authorization to other campuses software where the campus ID is required. That's going to save you a bunch of money because then you can issue students just a mobile credential instead of having to issue them a mobile credential and a physical credential. That doubles your cost. And it's really much less of a student experience because they've really got to carry these two things around to get the job done on campus. So really look for a mobile credential that does all of them, not just door access. A couple other things that we recommend looking for. Does that system integrate nicely with your card production? Even as much as the mobile credentials are taking off and getting really rapid adoption, there's probably going to be people on your campus who will need or insist upon a physical credential for some period of time. So does this integrate nicely with your card production system, again, without writing custom integrations? Is it sharing not just users and photos and credentials, but does it do all of that? So if you make a change in one system, it appears in another, or do you have to wait until that overnight batch job runs to synchronize the data between them? Door access integration. Do you have something that's real time or near real time to grant access? Or is this a manual file that gets generated every 2 a.m. every morning and sent over the system? You know, that's okay at the beginning of the semester when it runs 3 days before anyone shows up. But what happens when the athletes show up early and they're not put in on time? Or, you know, a student registers 2 days after classes start. Do they have to wait until tomorrow before they can get into the dorm? So those are important things to look at for door access. Um, for campus ID integrations, will it integrate with other software you have? Your rec center, the library, the parking, all these other systems you go inventory across campus to make sure it'll work with them. Again, if that credential works 90% of the places and not the other 10, you're probably much more likely to hear about the friction at the 10% that isn't supported than you are about the success at the 90% that do work. And also event attendance. If your transaction system itself doesn't actually track the attendance at all the events, does it integrate to the systems you use, both so that credential works on those systems and so you get data back for reporting and analytics? All right, so now it's time for our last poll question. The poll question is, I wish my campus transaction system was integrated with, and fill in the blank. So you'll have a poll question that will appear on the right-hand side of your screen. And you have about 30 seconds to fill that out.
Oh, I'm sorry, the poll isn't working, but if you can, just please put
Oh,
your questions in the chat, not a problem. So anyone, just please fill that in the chat. Thank you.
I apologize. I gave the wrong instructions there, Stephen.
No worries.
So just go ahead and fill in a word or two in the chat of the one campus system you really wish your transaction system was integrated with. Just go ahead and put that in the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. And we'll take about 30 seconds on that one. All right, I see a lot of great ones coming in, so everyone keep typing in there for a few more seconds. What's the one system on campus that you really wish your transaction system integrated with? All right, we'll go ahead and stop there. Because those are free form, they're a little hard to give you a quick feedback on that one, but it was a pretty broad section of answers there. So another thing I would look for to make that campus ID work everywhere on your campus is, does that transaction system have what I call configure not code integrations? It's good to say that there's a RESTful API available and you can integrate it if you want. And that, don't get me wrong, that's certainly better than nothing. But in this day and age, you're probably so tight on IT resources, trying to ask them to integrate to a bunch of different systems for you and to maintain it, it's going to be asking a lot. And in the end, you may not get all of the integrations that you want. So I really look at, does your transaction system have integrations to the common software on campus? Number one. And number two, does it have a reasonable way for those niche partners to write their own integration? Or if you really want to have your IT folks write their own for kind of those niche ones. So, for example, door access, many of the systems are very common. Is there a standard integration to some of those? But then you might find some other systems that were just developed by a department that needs integration, and that's one where there just needs to be a capability to develop your own. A couple other technical things you could ask for here. I'll go through this very quickly. Many of these I assume that many of you are familiar with. First of all, for accessibility, WCAG compliance, does it have it and what level? In our case for IDX, we built it right out of the gate to 2.0, actually now 2.1 level AA. So we were lucky in that we could design it from the start that way, but not all software supports that level of accessibility. Again, cybersecurity is really, there's the four elements of it: the culture, the technology, the people, and the processes. So having a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant report is good because that audits your vendors' processes. If they have good processes, they're much more likely to have a secure product, but it's not guaranteed. Obviously, many of your institutions have a very long questionnaire. We see cybersecurity questionnaires all the time. One thing that we do at Transact that's just kind of just one bit of it. In order to kind of monitor all that work, we have a cybersecurity monitoring service that looks over everything Transact. And one of the things it does in that monitoring process is it gives us feedback of, hey, where do we stand as a company relative to our competitors? And what we find is when we use that service, like we use BitSight, we're typically in about the top 3%. So that's pretty good. That's good affirmation we're doing the right thing. But again, what's most important for us is we've got to have that culture and that value of continuing that going forward, or that number is going to plummet. Also look at the reliability. What are they promising? For example, at 99.9% uptime, that's about 8 hours of downtime a year. Now, when it happens, of course, is important, but 8 hours of downtime isn't a whole lot in the course of 365 days. So look at that. What's the reliability? Earlier, we talked about single sign-on, and one of the big acronyms used there is what's called SAML Tier 2. It's basically a technical specification for software to integrate to your identity service. So if you use Duo on campus, you might use Azure AD, Okta, those kind of things. This is a common way for software to integrate to it. And what that does is when you log into that software, it actually calls back to your campus's identity provider service and says, hey, can this person log into this service? And if so, what are they allowed to do? And again, the real benefit there is think about when you have a new employee or new student on campus, the moment IT turns them on and say Duo, all those other applications see it and the students can get in. Cuts down on a ton of tech support calls. It's the same username and password they use everywhere else on campus, so it's going to cut down on all kinds of calls you're going to get. Same thing though on the other end. A student or employee leaves, the moment IT takes them out, they can't access the software anymore, and that's great for security. And then lastly, on the APIs, again, while we encourage you to look for companies that have the basic common integrations already written so you just configure it, look at what technology they're using. So this alphabet soup that we've got on the screen here, RESTful JSON API with Open API documentation. If you talk to a developer, both inside of your school or one of your partners, if you said that, that's not going to answer all their questions, but it's going to kind of convey that, hey, that technology partner is using some modern technology. So far, I don't hear any big obstacles, and it lets that conversation continue. So these are some of the things you could look for or ask for a good foundation. So lastly, just to kind of wrap up here, when we'll go to questions in just a moment. Here's some things to look for. Is this a real intuitive interface that my staff can learn very quickly, and especially my students? Is it truly SaaS-based and multi-tenant? Does it support a good NFC-based mobile credential? And this is going to give my students a modern experience that is going to really impress them and make them talk positively about our school. So they both come here and they stay. All right, so last thing before we jump into questions, if you'd like to learn more about this, I do recommend reach out and talk to us and we can tell you a little bit more about Transact IDX. Hopefully you'll find it's the right product for you. And so we'd love to have that conversation. Our phone number's here, the email, and if you don't already know your representative, we will get you in contact with the right representative to help answer your questions. All right, and with that, I believe I will turn over to Jennifer for our Q&A.
Yeah, before that, I'll just jump in really quickly, Scott. Thanks again for your presentation. Like you're saying, we're about to start the audience Q&A portion of our webinar. So where you can send in your questions, so Scott can answer your questions live on the air. If you haven't already, you can send in your questions in writing, and you can do that by accessing the Q&A panel, which you can find. It's right there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. It's the option next to the chat panel, chat button, I should say. And if you can't see it, there should be 3 dots next to the chat button. Click on that, and that should bring you to the Q&A panel. And so now, yes, I will pass things off to Jennifer from Transact Campus, who will facilitate the Q&A. Jennifer, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Scott, for such a great presentation. Just to say hello to everyone, my name is Jennifer Piotti with Transact. I'm the Senior Manager here for Marketing. One of the things that you'll notice on this last screen before we jump into the Q&A, because I know we have a few coming in, is if you are ready to learn more about what we can do with cloud-based technology, we have a phone number here, our email, as well as you can go to our website and contact us for more information. But Scott, one of the questions we have is, how is the fleshed out granular is the REST API and Transact IDX for schools that want to build custom integrations?
So the great news is because Transact IDX is relatively new, we've been able to use all the newest technologies. So the way we architected it, if you kind of went into the figurative engine room, is we're already using those APIs internally amongst all the different modules to bring in that functionality. And then what we do is we expose those out securely to customers to integrate to. So in general terms, over time, everything you see on screen, you'll be able to do through an API. The qualifier for over time is that in order to test things and prove them out, we might use it internally first within the product, and then later expose that out for others to integrate to. So right now there's API for some basic functionalities to do some very basic things, and then we're going to expand that out over time as well. So generally speaking, as you see more features added into IDX, you will see the API expand out as well.
Awesome, thank you. What next question, Scott, is I'm going to try to summarize this one up. Is when looking at wanting to go to this cloud-based technology, which departments would you recommend that I bring in to the conversation?
Obviously, that's going to start with, in many cases, IT, and they have to be centrally involved. The card office, auxiliary services, certainly whoever's managing your door access is almost always at the table. Whoever's managing your student information system, very, very, very commonly housing for your housing integration, the StarRez, the Adirondack RMSs of the world. And then after that, I think it depends how big of a table you want. When you have other departments, dining would certainly be one that will probably be at that table every time for point of sale and vending integration. But after that, I'd say look at your other departments and decide when and how many of them you want involved. For example, the recreation, many campuses have recreation management software on there that requires a campus ID. Do you want them involved? You might consider phasing those into the conversation a little bit later in the process, but I certainly wouldn't omit them because they might have needs or expectations that would be either very disappointed if they weren't involved in or very happy if they were. So to kind of reiterate, I think your key departments are going to be IT, the card office, certainly security, housing, and dining are probably going to be the ones that are at the table pretty much every time. And then other departments you'll want to bring in as appropriate.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Scott. Next one, and I think this is very much kind of geared for our wonderful clients and partners that we have currently at Transact. With our Transact TSE system, has there been an identified path for our current clients that are on a transaction TSE system and moving them over to the cloud-based IDX?
Yes, so we have two transaction systems currently, our Transact SaaS and our TSE. Right now, we are in the process of migrating SaaS clients over to IDX, so that's going on now, and there is a pretty well-defined process for that. For TSE, as many of you are aware, TSE has an incredible feature set and an incredible integration capability, so those migrations are going to be enabled a little bit later. If you're interested in that, I strongly recommend reaching out to your Transact representative. One of the things we'll do is we'll go through a technical assessment. Because TSE can integrate to so many things, we'll look at what all does it integrate to on campus, what are you doing with it, and what do you wish it did, so we can help identify when's that right time for you to move from TSE to IDX. So it's absolutely positively on our mind. It's just takes a little time to get up to that level of features that are in TSE.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. Let me pull this one up really quickly. There's a couple of different ones. Going to see if I can't summarize these in a different way. When looking at how one of the screens were showing that kind of going into the student access, many different kinds of systems, we have guest access. Will IDX also have that guest access where mom and dad or siblings or people will be able to, go in and add those kind of funds to their accounts?
Yes, definitely. We often refer to that as benefactor access. A parent or someone who might wish to put funds into the student stored value or meal plan account. Absolutely. And then also then the notion of having, guest meals and guest accounts within their meal plan or stored value, which is which is different. You only uses the word guest, but we do also understand that notion of experience. So the parent to put money into the account at the front end, when they visit their student on campus, they can also get a meal out if that's within the scope of your plans.
Okay. Would this work and how would it work with events for guests on campus or summer conferences and things of that nature?
Yes. So for events where you have students or staff who attend an event on campus, they can use their credential to track attendance. And we'll have other things built in like the attendance cap and so forth, so you can monitor capacity. So that will give you the some of the event attendance granting and tracking. Also, we will probably in the not too distant future build in some functionality so that you could basically do a counter for public attendance. You might have events that are attended by both students, staff, faculty, and the public, and you'd like to know how many attended. And then Jennifer, there's a second part to that question I think I forgot. Could you maybe repeat the second part?
Yes, one of the ones is how would it work with summer conferences?
Oh, yes, summer conferences. So one thing that we do envision doing in the not that distant future is having transact or credential types that can be short term. So for example, just another thing to simplify your life, and we realize that many schools now might build a pool of credentials or users for guests. They come, they're summer campers, they're on campus for a couple of days for a camp, business conference, something like that, and then they leave. So one of the things that we haven't done yet, we do a vision for is a guest credential. So you can actually set up a credential for somebody who's only going to be there for 4 or 5 days and then leave. And what that does is that gives you the data to track them. So you can then go back and report on what happened and discern different patterns between this business conference and this basketball camp and look for data there to help you better run the school in the future.
Perfect. All right, thank you. All right, next one. When looking at partnering, what are some of the partners that you're using for door access?
So right now, what it's our TSE system integrates with just about all of them, I think, because it's so broadly used. Some of our closest partnerships, though, are with Carrier, Linnell S2 products. So that is a very common partner of ours. We do also see fairly frequently on campus, the Genetech, the Software House, the RS2, increasingly Avigilon. So those are some of the most common ones we see. The ones that we work the closest with, though, are going to be the Carrier, the Linnell S2 products.
Okay. And at the moment, that's all that I have right here. Please, if there's anything else, pass this back over to Stephen. But if there are any other questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A or into the chat for myself personally, as you've been, and we will make sure and reach out to you with those answers.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. Like just as she said, as I go through my closing slides in just a few moments, please feel free to continue to putting them into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll make sure that us at UB will send all the questions over to Transact Campus so that they can get to your questions individually after the event. But first off, before I go through those slides, I just want to say thank you again, Scott, for your time here today. Jennifer for the Q&A portion, and of course, thank you to Transact Campus. And I'd also like just to take a minute to thank you, our audience, for joining us here today as well. For those of you who enjoyed what you saw, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by us here at UB, or University Business, which is the current leader in editorial coverage of news, current issues, and trends in higher ed. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to us at UB, and they stay up to date with us online, in our newsletters, and web seminars like this one. Also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe, that what you saw would be helpful to your colleagues, and I'm sure that would be the case, you'll be pleased to know that our team at UB, we will be sending you an email at some point tomorrow, and in that email, it'll include an on-demand recording of this webinar, as well as a link to the slides. So look out for that in your email. So with that, on behalf of UB, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe. Thank you very much.